Hello, everyone. My name is Meg Regan. I'm a Senior Director for Executive Education here at MIT Sloan School of Management, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Businesses for Inclusive Local Thriving Lab information session. We have a great agenda and an amazing panel of speakers and experts here today with us. So without any further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce you to the MIT team that has been integral to creating the BILT Lab, and then we can share the agenda for the session and dive right into it. So please join me in welcoming David Foster. David currently serves as a Distinguished Associate for the Energy Futures Initiative, an energy policy think tank led by former U.S. Energy Secretary Dr. Ernest Moniz. He is also a visiting scholar at the MIT's Energy Initiative, where he has written extensively on climate policy and social equity for the Roosevelt Project. Prior to working at the Department of Energy, Foster served as the founding executive director of the Blue-Green Alliance, a strategic partnership of 14 of America's most important unions and environmental organizations with a combined membership of 14.5 million. Welcome, Dave. And now please join me in welcoming Tom Giordano. Tom is the executive director for the Partnership for Rhode Island and the BILT Lab co-founder. Tom is an experienced advisor to CEOs and governors and a nationally recognized fundraising and social impact executive focused on creating spaces for collaboration around infrastructure, sustainability, education, and the workforce. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Providence College and an MBA from New York University's Stern School of Business. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Kate Isaacs. Kate is a senior lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Management and the BILT Lab co-founder. Dr. Isaacs is a teacher, researcher, speaker, and strategy advisor who helps leaders design organizations and stakeholder partnerships for people and places to thrive. She draws on design thinking, system dynamics, and developmental psychology to help leaders create conditions for collective intelligence, agile performance, and transformative change. She has a diverse background in ecology, systems engineering, and social psychology. She's a shadow work coach and trained in internal family systems therapy. Kate focuses on the positive potential in people and organizations, noticing and expanding what's already working and releasing obstacles that block our natural orientation toward joy, creativity, growth, and health. And now I'll turn it over to Kate.
Thank you so much, Meg. I'm just so excited to be online with our fabulous panel, and we will introduce them in just a moment in more detail. I will say a few words about what the BILT Lab is about, and we'll do a really brief exercise to just give you a taste of what this experience is. We hope by the end of the session today that you are excited about joining us in November for our on-site BILT Lab session and joining this new community of folks who are interested in supporting the energy transition and leading the energy transition in a way that's really great for your companies, great for your communities, and builds local talent pipelines, generates sustainable outcomes and community benefit. So without further ado, let me jump in, and I want to share just a few slides about what the BILT Lab is about before then introducing and hearing from Betony Jones from the Department of Energy, from Brad Hall from American Electric Power, Laura Goldberg from the Center for Houston's Future, and Madeline Schomburg and Dave Foster from EFI and MIT. So let me give you just a brief overview of what the lab is about. We will then hear from this wonderful group of folks about their experiences doing this kind of work in communities, and then we'll open it up for a whole conversation among us, and we'll be available to answer your questions and have a lively dialogue. All right, so let me share my screen, and I want to give you an overview of what the lab is about. So the lab is an executive training for companies and local partners. So we would love to have teams of company-led teams with local partners from a range of geographies in the lab, and a bunch of folks are already registered. The idea is for you all to come to the lab to advance your shared goals, your shared company and community goals, using a place-based approach in partnership with local stakeholders. And the lab is organized around 4 dimensions. helping companies and local partners advance your organization's energy and sustainability goals, your local talent system, and good jobs, and building that local talent pipeline and local talent system and providing good jobs, meeting local customer expectations and demand, of course, and then also engaging your local community in a way that provides benefits to them and grows the local economy, which is, of course, good for business. So I'd like to just give you a taste of what the lab is about. MIT is very experiential. Our motto is mens et manus, so mind and hands. So we want to get you doing stuff. We're not about just one-way flow of information here. So I'd like to invite you to just draw this this diagram on your iPad or a piece of paper that might be nearby, and just scratch out these two lines, a vertical line and a horizontal line. And the top is your organization's energy and sustainability goals. You might be a company, you might be a nonprofit, whoever you are joining us. You might be a local labor organization, a government organization. So whoever you are, whatever your organizational energy and sustainability goals, go at the top. At the bottom are your customer or client expectations or demands. So just scribble that out, write that down. On the left-hand side, local talent system and good jobs. And on the right-hand side, local community engagement and benefits. So just give yourself a second to write that down. And then what I'd like to invite you to do, after you've done that, think of just one geography that's really strategically important for your company or your organization, whoever you are on the call today. And then please draw 4 dots to indicate on a scale of 1 to 5, 0 being not at all and 5 being you're doing it the best possible, to indicate how well your organization's goals are being advanced on that dimension of the diagram now. Okay, and connect the dots. So you should get something that looks, some kind of diamond-y shaped thing. We call this a quadrilateral, if you want to get to a fancy term. Okay, I'll give you a second to do that. And this is just to get the conversation going. Okay, now please draw, you can do a dash line or take a different color if you have another color marker sitting there. Draw 4 dots indicating how well your company or your organization goals need to be advanced in that location within 12 to 18 months. So you should get something that maybe looks like this, or maybe your diagrams completely overlap and what you're doing now is exactly where you want to be 12 to 18 months from now. So you should have something that approximates looking like this, and then put a star next to your biggest priority to work on that's important for your organization and that strategically important geography for you right now. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop share for just a minute, and I want to ask Elaine. Elaine, we want to just get a sense of what you all out there are thinking. So Elaine, will you put that poll up on the screen? And we like to ask you to say where did you star your biggest priority? Where was that for you? And we want to just give you a moment to respond to that so we can see where you all are in your thinking and where you want to work. So go ahead and answer. You just get one response to that. Elaine, are answers coming in?
Yep, ending poll now.
Okay, great. All right, so can you just share with us where people are? Oh, I saw it pop up. There we go. Okay. All right, so really interesting. So we've got about a third and a third are around wanting to advance organizational energy and sustainability goals, and another approximately a third around local talent system and good jobs. And then the remainder around interesting customer expectations, demand, and local community engagement and benefit at 21%. So I would love to hear in chat if you all want to give a little flavor, just a comment about that for yourself. Would love to have that just going in chat so you guys can see what each other is really thinking about and wondering about for your geography. So while you're doing that, I want to just keep going with a little bit about the lab and the schedule, and then I'll end with a question for you all before I turn it over to Dave to introduce Betony. So let me go back and I'll share my screen and just give you an overview of the lab schedule. So we are wanting to launch this new community to bring you in to work on whatever that high priority issue is for you. So this is a project-based program where you're coming in and as a company and local partners convening a group to work on that high priority area that you've identified. We have a virtual launch on October 8th for an hour where we'll introduce the program and you'll get to meet the other folks in the program. Peer learning is a big part of this, a big part of the program. Then you'll come back 2 days later and get introduced to some pre-work that you'll be doing over the course of a month. It's not a lot of pre-work, but it's important because when you arrive on site in November, you'll be coming in to really dig in and do some work with your local community around that problem or issue that you want to move forward on for 2 days on site. And then we have a virtual capstone for 2 hours on December 16th, about 30 days later, just to check in and see how you're doing. Okay, so who is this lab for? This is for company leaders who are interested in leading their organization and also beyond their organization. So you should have responsibility for strategy, sustainability, talent, community engagement, one or more of the above. And then we're inviting company leaders to bring in community partners, and that can include any and all of the above. And I'll ask Tom, you just to say a word about what that might look like in your context in just a minute in Rhode Island. And so what we're asking you to do is to get a bit of a system in the room to work on that high priority issue that you've identified. There's only 50 seats for the fall cohort. So if you're interested, please register, sign up, first come, first serve. And we're targeting teams from 6 to 10 geographies so that you all can really learn from each other across regions. What people often find is you're facing the same problems no matter where you are in the country, and people learn a lot from each other. Okay, so what will the lab help me do? It'll help companies and their local partners to identify and plan for place-based investments in that strategically important geography. If you get things working well in one geography, then that good experience can be scaled to other geographies. Learning best practices for place-based community engagement, talent pipeline, and sustainability. The lab's intended to help you form new connections with a community of peers across the country who are trying to do similar work. And then we want to help you advance those goals that you identified with 4 takeaways. You're going to walk away with a strategic plan of the work that you want to do, a compelling story about it. Being able to tell a good story is an important part of an action plan, a 30-day action plan, and then you'll be walking away with a common language and stronger relationships with local partners. So let me just pause there. And Tom, will you just say just a word about what this looks like in Rhode Island, and then we will move to having Dave introduce Betony.
Yeah, absolutely, Kate. Thanks so much. In Rhode Island, obviously, as the ocean state, we're looking forward to a blue economy that can really propel us into a real economic development and success over the coming decades, and that requires a group of stakeholders who are working a bit closer together than we want than they are right now. We have, if you go back to the quadrant that Kate mentioned, right, we have a customer demand, which is a population that has told us very clearly they prioritize our sustainability as a state, but we don't have the local talent pipeline or the local community engagement as strong as we want. So bringing stakeholders from higher education, business, government, intermediaries that help train those folks, and obviously led by an employer voice that knows what the talent they are looking for in the coming years. So we're looking forward to participating and forwarding our blue economy with a group of stakeholders at the BILT Lab. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Tom. Dave, want to just turn it over to you. You've been working for decades in working around energy transition, community engagement, stakeholder engagement. Will you just say just a word about yourself and connection to the lab, and then please introduce Betony for us.
Certainly, and thank you, Kate. Yes, it has been a passion of mine to work on issues relating to the energy transition and a better world with high-quality jobs and respected communities. And so it's been very important to me to have partners who share that vision in developing a community of practice. And that is why our keynote speaker at today's webinar, Betony Jones, who I've known for many years and collaborated with, brings such an important perspective today to this program. Betony currently serves as the director of the Office of Energy Jobs at the Department of Energy, and she's senior advisor on labor to Secretary Granholm. Today, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, DOE has become something new. It's become the center for coordinating public-private partnerships and has close to $1 trillion of investments. We couldn't have a better leader at DOE in charge of building the business, community, and labor partnerships, as well as the community of practice necessary to sustain this kind of transition that guarantees high-quality jobs, thriving businesses, and engaged communities than Betony Jones. And Betony, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Just getting off mute here. Thanks so much, Dave. I am going to share a few slides, so bear with me as I pull that up. Okay, assuming you can all see this. Thanks for the introduction, Dave. My role at DOE is covers a few things. One, we are really trying to drive job creation from this historic investments in clean energy infrastructure and supply chains, i.e. manufacturing investments, trying to drive that job creation into communities all across the US. We're not just trying to create jobs, we're trying to also make sure that these projects will have the workforce that they need for successful implementation. And what that means is focusing on job quality, making sure that the jobs that we're creating with these federal investments are good enough to attract and retain the skilled workers that we are going to need for successful execution of this clean energy transition. But it's also not enough just to ensure that we're creating good quality jobs. We also need to ensure equitable access to these jobs and reduce systemic barriers to employment that are keeping some workers on the sidelines. That might include women in the energy sector who are pretty significantly underrepresented, or other disadvantaged workers facing barriers to employment. We know that we have big, lofty, ambitious goals. We're driving, as Dave said, across the federal government, over $1 trillion of federal money into infrastructure, a lot of that oriented toward clean energy, and that's going to create enormous demand for workers to make everything come together. We have this goal of focusing on job quality and workforce development and job access. For DOE, deployment is new. DOE has traditionally been an R&D organization, and now with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, we are driving infrastructure scale deployment. So we're really focused on demonstration and deployment projects, large infrastructure projects, many of which are place-based in particular communities. This funding is really truly historic, particularly in terms of investing through both direct grants, through loans, and through tax credits in the development of clean energy industries in the US. What's also historic and I think unprecedented is the conditions that we're attaching to federal funding to ensure project success, but also the success of the long-term clean energy transition. So what I want to talk about today is exactly how we're doing that, how we're conditioning the federal funding that DOE has oversight over to really drive community benefits and workforce development in the places where these investments are going. So Our framework at DOE is called the Community Benefits Plan Framework. This is something that is applied to every single dollar of our discretionary money, all of our grants and all of our loans. And it has 4 parts. 1, we ask applicants seeking funding to develop a plan upfront to tell us how they're going to ensure that benefits flow to disadvantaged communities, how they're going to invest in job quality in order to attract and retain the skilled workers that they're going to need for both construction and permanent operations. We ask them to think upfront around how they're going to ensure equitable access to jobs and other wealth building opportunities. And we ask upfront, how are they planning to meaningfully engage with affected community and labor stakeholders? And what we encourage is that engagement isn't just one-way engagement, but it really is negotiation leading to enforceable agreements and long-term accountability to community members and workers. What's, I think, important to note is that this framework, which applies, again, like I said, to all of our discretionary money, is really built in, it's woven now into the fabric of DOE. What that means is that we consider this in our solicitations. So generally what we do is that 20% of the score of a proposal is based on this plan that addresses these 4 factors. That then gets factored into the selections and how we evaluate projects based on the strength of the voluntary commitments that entities seeking funding are making. If they're successfully selected, then these commitments get baked into the contractual terms and obligations of that funding and carried through to implementation and reporting. This community benefits plan is factored into the go, no-go decisions that we make for ongoing funding, because often our funding isn't, it's distributed in phases. So by doing this, we're really ensuring long-term accountability, not just to the taxpayers, not just to DOE, but also to the communities and workers that are affected by the deployment of these projects. This ensures broadly shared benefits of this taxpayer money, that the transition to clean energy is not just opportunities for businesses to tap into new markets, but it's also opportunities for communities and workers to benefit from those investments. And by ensuring that, we create sort of a virtuous cycle where we're then also building support, broad support for the ongoing clean energy transition. One thing that is really drives our approach to community benefits plans is, one, we think they improve the outcomes of individual projects and the long-term clean energy transition, but importantly, they also reduce risks. So 1, we think that this 4-parted approach is just a pragmatic approach to good business. It just defines good business, that responsibility to the community, responsibility to workers. Second, we know that this type of engagement and this type of planning is really important for gaining that social license to operate in communities, for building support for project implementation and really building durable support for these projects. They foster accountability. They also leverage other resources and guide partnerships that are additive to project outcomes. And finally, the reduction of risk. This might mean risks due to labor shortages or workforce shortages, permitting delays, labor strife that could lead to slowdowns or work stoppages, or other community opposition. This upfront planning, upfront engagement really helps mitigate some of those risks. Now, we know that this approach and what we're asking for from the private sector is different than what they've been asked to do before. We get this feedback a lot. There's not necessarily opposition to it, but people don't know how to do it. And so what we're doing, one of the initiatives that we're doing to support capacity building and technical assistance is our Community Workforce Readiness Accelerator for Major Projects. Government loves acronyms. The acronym here is RAMP. So this is ramps to get workers engaged in these large place-based projects funded under President Biden's Invest in America agenda. What we are trying to do is really build capacity in real places to connect local workers to these historic opportunities. And in so doing, make sure that the developers of these projects have the skilled workers from the local community to get the job done. So the problems that we're solving for in this RAMP initiative are potential shortages of skilled workers in areas that are receiving really large or clustered clean energy investments, solving for the lack of familiarity and practical know-how on how to design and implement effective community benefits plans, fostering trust and cohesion and partnerships in the local community to connect workers to these projects, investing in capacity building to tap into other sources of funding beyond federal funding for deployment, and really supporting communities to engage underrepresented groups in the energy workforce. So the cornerstone of this effort is funding for up to 14 fellows and 14 targeted geographies to really lead the development of these collaboratives, engage different partners in the community to support those partnerships around workforce development and connecting workers to these opportunities. And to show you where our target communities are, I have a map showing where we are seeing these clustered and large energy investments. This map is from the website invest.gov, which tracks public and private investments in infrastructure and manufacturing facilities across the US. The map you're seeing is slightly outdated. There's more dots on the map all the time. This suite of laws under the Invest in America agenda is really driving absolutely unprecedented investments in the clean energy industry in communities all across the country. So the list on the left shows these target geographies where we're recruiting and placing fellows. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it back to the moderators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betony. Such a great overview of the work that you're doing. And I'm sure that the participants will have a lot of questions for you. What we're going to do now is turn it over to Brad Hall, who's going to share some of his incredible work. I've known Brad and the work that American Electric Power is doing for a decade and a half, and they're such an impressive company. Brad is the Vice President of External Affairs for Appalachian Power Company within American Electric Power. He has responsibility for customer services, corporate communications, government affairs, economic development. What don't you have responsibility for, Brad? Community affairs and environmental issues, covering your company's territories in Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. Prior to that, he was an entrepreneur and also served as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Southeast Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. So welcome, Brad. And Brad's going to share just briefly about what he's been doing, and then he'll be available for the rest of the call, as well as Laura and Madeline and Dave and Tom and Betony and I to answer questions. Okay, go ahead, Brad.
Thank you so much, Kate. Well, thanks for allowing me to be here today. Excited to share some of this with you, of things that we're doing in an area that's really challenged for jobs. And there's a lot of reasons for that: topography, geography. And so we'll just cover a little bit about the work we've been doing for well over a decade to really ramp up our initiatives in economic development to help bolster communities' ability to attract and retain jobs when you're really in a declining market for jobs in an area. And that decline has really been driven by the coal mining operations that are dwindling due to lack of demand for thermal coal, as our coal plants transition to either natural gas or have been shuttered over the past several years. And then also as the steel industry is kind of left central Appalachia, where we're providing service. And that has really kind of dwindled many thousands of jobs in the area. And these are high-paying, high-wage jobs with great benefits. And then we have very few industries for these folks to transition into. And so we've been working hard with our communities to create new opportunities. We serve in very southern West Virginia, In Western Virginia, Southwestern Virginia, and Eastern Tennessee, we have about 1.2 million customers there, and we're working to create some unique opportunities. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. The first opportunity I want to talk to you about, and it really kind of brings in some of the other things we've worked on, is a concept that we've called Appalachian Sky. And Appalachian Sky is kind of named after, you may have watched a movie back in the 90s, I think it was, called October Sky. It was based on a book written by Homer Hickam, who's a famous West Virginian who became a rocket scientist out of a coal community. And it was a very inspiring story. Homer's still alive in West Virginia. And with that, we've named this Appalachian Sky, with the idea of there's so many talents in this region, and we want to create opportunities for these great people. So back in 2017, we started really looking at the data of these workers and how could those skill sets of coal miners and steel workers transition into other industries that might have, other strong wages that could create great jobs in the region. And what we found is we dug into the labor analysis as APCO and AEP really drove this data mining. We found out that metal fabricators was a really large skill set that we found in both coal miners and in steel workers. In fact, so much so that 8 times the national average of metal fabricators were located in this area in around 2017. As we looked at other industries, if you look at aviation and aerospace, the number one skill needed in those areas is metal fabricators. And so as we dug in, we said, okay, well, how can we retrain these folks quickly so they could respond to this need? And how do we bring these industries to the area? So we have been really working on that for several years now. And the fact that the aerospace and aviation industry has really strong wages, this made a lot of good sense. And there's a lot of reasons why it would work in the area. The next thing we did was really focus on certifying our airports in the region. So we have a lot of general aviation airports, and these are attractive to, say, MRO facilities who do maintenance repair operations for aviation and aerospace units. They like to come into areas where there's not a lot of traffic and do that work, and it works out well. So we've certified 4 airports in the region that would be aero ready. And what aero ready means is we worked with a consultant who did a really deep dive analysis of property, labor, education, and infrastructure to say these areas can support the aerospace industry. And so we got those certifications and helped fund that for the areas in southern West Virginia, also eastern Kentucky, and one in southern Ohio. And then after we funded that work, and mostly in parallel, we worked with the General Assembly in both Virginia and West Virginia to get legislation that would allow us to do what we call business ready sites. And why that was important is we needed to be able to build transmission assets to key industrial sites so that we would have energy capacity at those sites to attract industry. But for that legislation, we had to wait till we had a customer in hand. And you would get that customer in hand, and then you would build it, and the timeline was too long. So we were at a disadvantage to attract industry. So we now are preparing 6 sites within Virginia and West Virginia that will have energy on site ready to attract industry, and we already are seeing success from that. So that was a big success for us, and we've continued to see some of that. And then the other part of the data that we wanted to talk about is that there's a lot of aerospace around Central Appalachia. And so what we wanted to do is get them to look at this workforce, because everyone was having workforce challenges, to come and locate within our territory. And you also have an increase in business in aerospace, as it was a $963 billion industry in 2023, and it continues to increase. So in parallel to everything I've just said to you, and trying to stay in our tight timeline today, because I could talk forever about this, we partnered with some key stakeholders to help us in our efforts here. Not only our local and regional economic development agencies and the state's economic development agencies, but we needed education partners who would share this vision and help us create these educational opportunities. And so Marshall University really, really latched on very early on in this initiative. And so you probably watched the We Are Marshall movie somewhere in time. Yes, it's the same school. And they are a state school in West Virginia, and they are wonderful to work with. And the first thing they did was we partnered with them to build a flight school. So now Marshall University has the Bill No Flight School. AP Foundation provided $750,000 to help get this initiative off the ground for the university. And in 2021, they started their first enrollment, and they are now going to be producing about 50 commercial pilots a year. That's already happening, and it's being a great success at the airport, the Yeager Airport in Charleston, West Virginia. And that program is going to continue to expand. Also, Marshall University created an A&P school at the Tri-State Airport in Huntington, West Virginia, so that you would be producing airframe and power plant mechanics. And these are high demand jobs, high wage jobs. Folks come out with a 2-year degree. They could work anywhere in the world, quite frankly, coming out of this program. And they'll be producing 25 plus students, graduates a year out of that program. We also picked up New River Community and Technical College in Raleigh County, who is also building an A&P school near one of the airports that we certified there. And they'll be producing 25 students a year. So we've now created this chain of events through education where we're creating the skilled workforce that we need. We're building the sites that we need. We're putting funds into these sites and into these communities so that they can be ready to attract industry. And so we are now moving into the next phase to help create the sites and attract the industries. We're also working with the Tri-State Airport there in Huntington to create another 90 acres on site there adjacent to the airport. And we've already helped create a 105-acre site adjacent to the airport in Raleigh County, West Virginia. So there's a lot of activity happening, a lot of partners moving in the same direction, and it's created a real strong vision that many stakeholders have been able to come together and partner with to create opportunity in the mountains of West Virginia and East Kentucky and Southern Ohio. So far, we're already seeing jobs locate at the Raleigh County site in West Virginia. We've had Clottner Blast, who is expanding there and creating a bunch of jobs. It's not aerospace, but as we're getting these aerospace sites ready adjacent to the airport, we're already seeing some activity and interest in that. We attracted the first aviation MRO facility, maintenance repair operation, at the Tri-State Airport there, where they're doing maintenance and avionics installations and helicopters and airplanes at the site there at the airport. And this was not aviation either, but one of the sites that we worked on and was an AEP-owned site, Nucor Steel is now going to be locating its largest greenfield facility in West Virginia. This is a $3 billion investment. It's going to create 800 full-time jobs, and it's going to change the face of Mason County, which is a little north of Charleston, West Virginia. And that happened due to a lot of this work that I've just talked about in a site that we were investing in, sold to them for a steal, if you will, and helped them be ready to locate there. And that construction is underway, and we expect them to ramp up sometime next year. And that will be a huge, huge shot in the arm for the economies of Southern West Virginia.
Brad, if I could amplify that great story, I think that is just a fantastic example of the kind of work that the lab is wanting to support business leaders in doing. I mean, great for the community, great for the American economy as we're in a moment of energy transition and reshoring manufacturing. It's just such a great example of what when you lead beyond your walls, that's good for your business and the communities. Laura, I would love to turn it over to you just to share the fantastic work you're doing at the Center for Houston's Future. Laura is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, Community Communications and Community Engagement. Previously, she was a business editor and reporter for the Houston Chronicle for nearly 20 years, so she knows something about communication. She's been very deeply involved in the center's groundbreaking energy transition and clean hydrogen ecosystem work. And she's going to share a little bit today about the great work that they're doing in Houston that might bust up some of the stereotypes that we have about Houston, because they're doing some fantastic stuff around the energy transition there. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And it's great to be here. So I'm going to try to speed through a lot of different threads in my comments, starting with some broad observations and then talking a little bit about the center's energy transition / clean hydrogen journey, hit a few, debunk a few Houston myths, and then sort of end with some, ongoing questions and challenges that we'll need to work to address. So starting just with a few broad observations at the center, we're a nonprofit that focuses on issues that are critical to the long-term future of our region, pretty business and economic focused. So I'll say in this process, it's very important to have both a big vision and a roadmap with small steps for getting there. You need both the big and the small. Critically important to build coalitions and consensus, and of course consensus where it can be built from the ground up and at every step in your process. And as you're doing that, of course, don't assume that different groups or even leaders or executives in the same corporations or entities know each other, because they often don't. And you very much need a connector to bring this all together. And that's one thing that the center has had a long history of success at. Thought leadership and public education is very important in these processes, as is the case for anything that's a significant change. And really encourage everybody to think about different messages for different audiences. So whatever your project is, it may be building resiliency, it may be cutting carbon emissions, reducing local pollution, creating jobs, driving GDP growth. Some things resonate with more audiences than other things. So shifting to our journey at the Center for Houston's Future, we started this work more than 6 years ago, as I mentioned, and it was really launched with some broad economic modeling that we did to look at what was driving the region's economy now and in the future, and what would happen, with a range of changes and projections. And energy, of course, continued to be very, very important. And we saw some potential for these energy transition jobs and, frankly, a need for Houston to lead. So we were a little bit out in front of kind of the conventional wisdom there. So we started with doing some thought leadership. We had we called it low carbon energy transition focused conference in Houston, which as far as we know was the first conference that was specifically focused on these issues in Houston. Interestingly enough, some of our own corporate board members at the time were hesitant to put the words climate change in the title, which was one of the big sponsors' preferences. So we went with low carbon future, which then provided a platform for actually Michelle to actually call out some of the Houston community for not wanting to engage on this topic. And, we had media, generated some buzz. So it was an interesting experience. Then we did some economic research with the University of Houston, focusing on 4 ways forward market sizing opportunities for the Houston region to lead in the energy transition. One of those 4 pathways was clean hydrogen, which at the time wasn't getting as much buzz as, say, carbon capture and some of the others. So one of the things we like to do at the center is look for the gaps and the opportunities. So we decided we were going to focus on clean hydrogen. So we sort of started our process over to work on a big vision, consensus building, and roadmap. And we had some donated support from McKinsey and led a very broad open process. By the time we released the roadmap and the report, we had more than 100 stakeholders contribute. We had support from the city. We had informed a bipartisan group of lawmakers at all levels of government. We specifically called out job creation opportunities and GDP growth potential. And then when the bipartisan infrastructure law came along, we were already in a position to build off our work. And we laid which laid the groundwork and the basis for what would become the industry-led high-velocity clean hydrogen hub. The center, we acted as the founding organizer on high velocity. And I will just say, there's always a lot of questions and interest in high velocity, but given that we are currently in ongoing negotiations with the Department of Energy for our grant award, can't really say too much or anything more about high velocity. Our broader ecosystem work at the center includes a clean hydrogen steering committee, which has more than 40 companies from across the value chain along 6 different work streams. For example, one of them involves international trade relationships, one work stream on demand. We're also part of several efforts focused on job creation and upskilling to fill jobs, especially in historically underserved communities. Then we're also partners with the Children's Museum of Houston and a couple local school districts to start introducing the concepts of energy transition and the low carbon future to middle school and elementary school students. So I'm going to shift to Houston myths, which is, of course, that Houston is anti-energy transition, anti-climate change acknowledgement. And the reality on the ground is that you see a strong commitment in a variety of Houston quarters, boardrooms, organizations to a low carbon or no carbon future. And I think the reality is, given our concentration of the energy industry here in Houston, if Houston can't or won't do it, we're just not going to succeed. And I think if you look back, certainly after Hurricane Harvey, we really started to see a lot more public, acknowledgement of climate change and extreme weather and the need to act. The city of Houston at the time was very active, developed its climate action plan. The mayor at the time was involved nationally and internationally in climate groups. Some of the folks on this call may be familiar with Greentown Labs, of course, which opened a Houston outpost and is thriving with climate tech startups. I mentioned we have more than 40 companies on our steering committee. The Greater Houston Partnership, the region's main chamber of commerce, has its own energy transition initiative. And if you look across our universities, Rice, University of Houston, Texas Southern, Prairie View A&M, Texas A&M, University of Texas, and our range of community colleges. People are at work doing innovative research, teaching, training, and working on job skills efforts around the energy transition. So going forward, challenges and questions, we really need to focus on how to aggregate and spur demand for products and services. And for example, we are working with a group on clean hydrogen demand to address non-economic factors that could be potential barriers to driving demand, supply chain development, as I mentioned, workforce development, community acceptance, really doing two-way community engagement in a meaningful way, and broadly not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. We don't really have time to wait to act and scale as we go along.
Thanks so much, Laura. Part of what we're trying to do with this call is really shine a spotlight on the fantastic work that's happening all over the country. And I'm just going to introduce Madeline. That's just fabulous to have examples from Houston and, and from Appalachia, Brad, and the great work that you're doing. I want to just briefly introduce Madeline, who's going to say a few words about her impressive research around stakeholder engagement and community engagement and what she's doing at EFI Foundation. Dr. Schomburg is the director of research at the EFI Foundation. She focuses on energy justice, examining access and inclusion in policy processes and decision-making. Most of her work has focused on domestic, unconventional oil and gas development and investigating the role of interest groups in mobilizing constituents to participate in political processes. and the role of policy entrepreneurs in diffusing relevant policies throughout the U.S. She's also an assistant professor of environmental policy at Colorado State University, and she has collaborated with a number of institutions and community partners to advance research in the intersection of energy, environment, and community. So Madeline, will you say just a few words about your research? And I know you want to share a report that's available for everyone on this call as well.
Yes, thank you so much for that introduction, Kate. Since I know we're short on time, I'm going to keep it really brief and just kind of give a little bit of an overview to EFI so you know more about what we do and how I fit into that. So as Kate indicated, the EFI Foundation, or Energy Futures Initiative Foundation, was founded 7 years ago by former Secretary of Energy Ernest Moniz. And one of the sort of cornerstones of the work that we've done in those 7 years has really focused on the workforce components of the clean energy transition. So really trying to think about how do we make sure that we're going to have good quality jobs that are a part of the transition? How do we make sure that labor groups are a part of all of the conversations and decisions that are made in the transition? And so one of our major thrusts of the last several years has been the labor energy partnership that we have done in coordination with the AFL-CIO. And 2 years ago, EFI decided to bring me in to expand our focus to not just labor communities, but also to think a little bit more about some of those overburdened frontline communities that we now hear a lot about. And so, as Kate indicated, a lot of my background has focused on what we call procedural justice, so how people are brought into these conversations and how people are a part of these decisions. And in the last couple of years since I've been here, that work has really expanded to focus on some of these more controversial clean energy technologies like hydrogen, like carbon capture. And so I'm just going to drop a link in the chat actually to, this was our first publication that came out on this particular topic, and I'm going to drop another link to the second, and the third is coming out maybe tomorrow. So all of these together basically are just the result of the last couple of years of really targeted survey work to try to understand, for people from these different communities, which includes labor, includes tribal, includes disadvantaged communities, how are they sort of viewing the efforts that are being made right now to bring them into the process, and where can we improve? And so for the sake of time, I'm going to leave it there, but thank you so much, Kate, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Madeline. Thank you. And Madeline is, and her research is part of what we want to bring in and offer to folks who are involved in the lab. Dave, anything you want to say before we open it up for questions from the participants that you all might have? And we have a couple going in chat. Okay, looks like he's saying no. You're on mute, Dave.
Sorry about that. As one quick point, and then we can get into the questions. As someone who lived through the loss of over 300,000 jobs in the steel industry in the 1980s and 90s, I know how things can go terribly wrong in managing transitions. But I also know that hitting right at what Betony was discussing, developing a strong community of practice on the right way to manage change can be successful for all the various stakeholders. And so to me, that's what this investment in the BILT Lab is all about, and why we would encourage people to think seriously about attending. And I'll kick it back to you, Kate.
Great, thanks, Dave. So just want to open it up to you all in the last 5 minutes, and I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes afterwards as well. We have a couple of questions in the chat, but just as you're thinking about what you've heard from everybody today, thinking about why you might want to come and be part of this BILT Lab community, what questions do you have for us? What's on your mind? And let me, so put that please in chat so we can see what's on your mind and what your reaction is after hearing all of this. Let me just highlight Mary's question and Rebecca's question. And Mary's asking, and I think, Betony, can you see this? I'll turn this over to you. Mary's asking, how about the current legislation? Did all of the legislation need renewal? And then Rebecca's asking about what job opportunities and educational support and mentorship does DOE provide in the Southeast? I think you mean South. Am I reading that right, Rebecca? Let me know if I'm not. specifically in rural communities with agriculture, and she's from Florida. So Betony, any thoughts on those questions? Thanks, Rebecca.
I guess I don't exactly understand the question about current legislation. The bipartisan infrastructure law was a new piece of legislation with a lot of funding for infrastructure spread across a lot of different agencies, and it was significant for DOE because it for the first time gave DOE that level of infrastructure scale funding. The Inflation Reduction Act was also a new and really historic piece of legislation that was passed for the first time 2 years ago. I think we just had the 2-year anniversary.
Great, thank you. And Mary, if you wanted to clarify in chat what your question was, then we can get some clarity. Okay, that was during the aviation talk. So Brad, I think that question is for you. Mary's asking a question about the current legislation. Does that make sense to you, Brad?
Not sure I'm clear on legislation on training, or I did speak about legislation on business ready sites. And that legislation is still enacted. There's no sunset on that law. It allows us to construct transmission assets with the help of identifying those sites from the State Economic Development Agency.
Okay, great. Mary, let us know in chat if that answered your question, or if there's any additional questions you'd like to ask us. And this is open for you all in the last few minutes about any questions you have for any of us, any questions you have about the lab and in the new community that we're trying to launch. So happy to answer those if you want to put any of those in chat. Mary, okay, Brad spoke about the need of creating new legislation, was wondering, okay, what was already in place?
Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. I mean, I don't remember speaking of new legislation. We are, the legislation that we created was what we saw as a need to do some work. Really, we're very focused on partnering with our stakeholders, investing in our communities, and then moving next to work with strategies on all those partners to attract industries now, so that when those folks come out of those education programs, they are able to walk right into a job in the community.
Great, thanks. Jane, hi Jane, it's nice to have you here. So Jane's asking, with all the positive activities, I would suggest that you should communicate success more broadly, So maybe that's for you, Brad, I assume. Is that right, Jane? So yeah, I agree. And hopefully this gives you a chance to share your story more widely. That's part of what we're doing with the lab, is helping to shine a light on this great work, write about it, do research about it, and for everybody. Okay, I agree, Jane. I agree. We should all be sharing our successes more broadly. Charlotte, any funding available for attending the lab if community stakeholders don't have the funds available this fiscal year to attend? Charlotte, that is something we're very conscious about. We are working on approaching various folks to secure funding for community partners, not only for the tuition, but to pay them a stipend for their time to come to the lab. We know that's really important, so we are working on that. We will let you know if and when we have something to share on that front. Thank you for that question. Well, we're 1 minute past the hour. However, there's a lot of folks still on the line. I know that Dave has to roll off. He has a hard stop, but very happy to answer any more questions that you all have. I'm going to put my email address in chat, and anyone can email me with questions, and we're happy to answer those for you. And, like any new ideas, we are working to get this off the ground and really form this community of people who want to learn together, advance this kind of work together, shine lights on each other's great work and share successes, as Jane, you're encouraging us to do. So like any new thing, we need to know that you're interested in coming. So if you would like to come, please do register and let us know that as soon as possible. Seats are limited, and we really would love to go ahead with this program, and we're very excited about it and hope you all will join us this fall. So please go ahead and go to the website and register. Elaine just put that in chat. I am putting my email in chat, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have. And thank you for all your enthusiasm and excitement. I appreciate all the chat comments coming through, and I hope that you all decide to join us and get to meet each other and learn and grow together.